Welcome to our channel. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The address led to a narrow brownstone in Bed-Stuy that had seen better decades. Damon sat in his town car, staring at the building's chipped brick facade and rusted fire escape, while his driver nervously eyed the group of teenagers gathered on the corner. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where black town cars belonged, and everyone seemed to know it. "Sir, are you certain this is correct?" his driver asked, glancing at the GPS with obvious doubt. Damon checked the address Patricia had given him one more time. 847 Macon Street, apartment 4B. This was it, the lair of the woman who had somehow managed to trap him into marriage during one reckless night in Vegas. He'd spent the entire drive from Manhattan crafting his approach, firm but fair, businesslike but not cruel. He'd offer her a generous settlement to sign the annulment papers quietly. Everyone had their price, especially someone living in a place like this. "Wait here," he said, stepping onto the cracked sidewalk. The building's entrance was a study in urban decay, peeling paint, a broken intercom, and a door that hung slightly askew on its hinges. Damon climbed 4 flights of stairs that creaked ominously under his Italian leather shoes, the smell of cooking spices and old wood growing stronger with each floor. By the time he reached 4B, he was questioning whether Patricia's investigator had gotten the right address. Apartment 4B had a cheerful yellow door that seemed almost defiant in its brightness. Before he could knock, the door across the hall opened and an elderly Latina woman peered out, her dark eyes immediately suspicious. "You lost, mister? I'm looking for Samira Brookes." The woman, Mrs. Rodriguez according to the nameplate, looked him up and down with the thoroughness of a customs inspector. "What you want with Mira? It's a personal matter." "Personal matter, my ass," Mrs. Rodriguez muttered, but loud enough for him to hear. "Mira don't mess with Wall Street types. She got better sense than that." Before Damon could respond, the yellow door opened and there she was. Samira looked smaller than he remembered, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing paint-stained jeans and an oversized sweater that had definitely seen better days. No makeup, no jewelry, no designer clothes, and yet she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. The recognition hit him like a punch to the stomach, followed immediately by the memory of her laughter, her touch, the way she'd looked at him that night like he was worth knowing. Their eyes met, and he watched shock, panic, and something that might have been guilt flicker across her face. "Mrs. Rodriguez, it's okay," she said quickly, her voice strained. "I know him." The older woman gave Damon another suspicious look. "You sure, Mija? 'Cause I can call my nephew Luis. He don't like men in expensive suits bothering the ladies in this building." "I'm sure. Thank you." Mrs. Rodriguez retreated reluctantly, but Damon noticed she left her door conspicuously ajar. "Hello, Samira." His voice came out colder than he'd intended, but the sight of her had thrown him off his carefully prepared script. "Damon." She gripped the door frame like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "What are you doing here?" "I think you know exactly why I'm here." For a moment she looked like she might deny everything. Then her shoulders sagged slightly and she stepped back to let him in. "How did you find me?" "Private investigator," he said, stepping into her apartment. It wasn't difficult. The studio was tiny, maybe 400 square feet total, with a Murphy bed folded into the wall and a kitchenette that was little more than a hot plate and a mini fridge. Canvases covered every available surface, some finished works that took his breath away, others half-completed studies in color and light. The space was cramped but clean, filled with the kind of creative energy that money couldn't buy. This wasn't what he'd expected at all. "Cozy," he said, and immediately regretted the condescension in his tone. Samira's back stiffened. "Not all of us can afford penthouses, Damon. Some of us actually have to work for our living space." "I work." "You move money around," she interrupted, turning to face him. "There's a difference." He pulled the marriage certificate from his jacket pocket and set it on her small table. "We need to talk about this." Samira stared at the document like it was a loaded gun. "Where did you get that?" The state of Nevada was very helpful. They also provided photos. The color drained from her face. "Photos? Very thorough documentation of our ceremony. He studied her reaction carefully, looking for signs of the calculating gold digger he'd expected to find. Instead he saw genuine horror. Oh God! She sank onto her single chair, pressing her hands to her face. This is a nightmare. Quite the performance, Damon said, his voice deliberately cool. Though I have to admire the long-term planning. Getting me drunk, convincing me to stop. Samira's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Just stop right there. Stop what? Acknowledging what happened. She stood up, her eyes blazing with an anger that seemed entirely genuine. You think I planned this? You think I somehow orchestrated getting you drunk and dragging you to that ridiculous chapel? The thought had occurred to me. Well, you can unoccur it right now. She moved to her easel, gripping it like an anchor. I had no idea who you were that night, Damon. None. You were just another rich tourist looking for a good time in Vegas. And now that you know? Now that I know, I want this whole mess to disappear as quickly as possible. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts. I already called a lawyer this morning. He says we can get an annulment easily given the circumstances. Damon felt an unexpected stab of something that might have been disappointment. Just like that. Just like that. She found what she was looking for and showed him the screen, a contact for Davidson Legal Services. I don't want your money, Damon. I don't want your connections or your lifestyle or anything else that comes with being accidentally married to a billionaire. I want my life back. The fierce independence in her voice caught him off guard. This wasn't a woman angling for a payday. This was a woman who seemed genuinely terrified of being associated with him. You called a lawyer before I even found you. The second I Googled your name and realized what I'd done. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you have any idea what this could do to your reputation? Being married to someone like me? Someone like you? A nobody from Brooklyn who lives in a fourth-floor walk-up and shops at thrift stores. Her voice grew smaller, more vulnerable. I'm not one of your society girlfriends, Damon. I'm not sophisticated or connected or anything that would make sense in your world. He found himself studying her face, the way her eyes showed every emotion, the complete absence of calculation or artifice. When was the last time someone had been this honest with him? When was the last time someone had wanted nothing from him? What did your lawyer say about the process? 60 days if we both agree. No fault annulment based on temporary incapacity due to alcohol. She pulled a manila folder from a drawer and handed it to him. The papers are all ready. You just need to sign. Damon opened the folder, scanning the legal documents. Everything was straightforward, professional, designed to dissolve their marriage as if it had never happened. No demands for alimony, no claims on his assets, no complications whatsoever. It was exactly what he should have wanted. Your lawyer works fast. I told him it was urgent. Samira wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very young and very alone. Look, I know this is embarrassing for you. Having your name associated with someone like me, even temporarily. But if we handle this quietly, no one ever has to know it happened. Someone like you, he repeated slowly. You know what I mean. Actually, he was beginning to think he didn't know what she meant at all. The woman standing in this tiny apartment, surrounded by her art and her independence, wasn't someone to be embarrassed about. She was remarkable, talented, genuine, completely unimpressed by his wealth or status. The annulment, he said, looking at the papers again. It's the right thing to do, Samira said quickly. The only thing that makes sense. Damon found a pen in his jacket pocket, clicked it open, and signed his name with the decisive strokes that had closed billion-dollar deals. When he looked up, he saw relief flood Samira's face. Thank you, she said quietly. I know this isn't easy for either of us, but it's done, he said, setting the papers on her table. 60 days and we'll both be free. Free, she repeated like she was testing the word. They stood there for a moment in awkward silence. Two strangers who had shared the most intimate night of their lives and were now erasing it with legal documents. I should go, Damon said finally. Yes, Samira agreed, but neither of them moved. For what it's worth, he said, that night in Vegas, it wasn't entirely a mistake. Parts of it were. He searched for the right word. Memorable. A faint smile crossed her lips. Parts of it were pretty amazing. In another life, we might have been something incredible, she finished softly. But in this life, we're just two people who made a beautiful mistake. Damon nodded, though something in his chest felt tight and wrong. Take care of yourself, Samira. You too, Damon. He walked to the door, his hand on the handle, and for a moment he almost turned back. Almost asked her what would happen if they didn't sign those papers, if they gave this impossible thing a chance to become something real. But then he thought of his world, the board meetings and society events, the business dinners and charity galas where she would never fit, where she would be dismissed as a gold digger or worse. He thought of the media scrutiny, the way they would tear her apart just for being associated with him. She deserved better than that. She deserved her freedom. Goodbye, Samira, he said, and walked out of her life for the second time. The call from Patricia came at 7 in the morning, which meant the news was either very good or catastrophically bad. Given Damon's recent luck, he wasn't optimistic. There's been a development, she said without preamble. Nevada changed their annulment requirements last month. New state mandate requires mandatory counseling before any marriage dissolution. Damon set down his coffee cup with the careful precision of a man trying not to break expensive things. Counseling. 3 sessions minimum with a state-certified marriage counselor. Both parties must attend, or the annulment gets denied and you have to wait a full year to refile. A year? The Save Nevada Marriages Initiative. Apparently the governor thinks too many people are getting divorced on impulse. Patricia's tone suggested her opinion of the governor's priorities. The first session is scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. Dr. Elena Vasquez in Lower Manhattan. Damon stared out at the Manhattan skyline, calculating the potential damage. A year of being married to Samira meant a year of questions from his board, his family, the media. A year of having his personal life dissected by people who thrived on other people's mistakes. Can we challenge this? I've already had 3 lawyers look at it. Nevada has jurisdiction and the law is ironclad. I'm sorry, Damon. 20 minutes later, he was leaving a voicemail for Samira that was more professional than he felt. This is Damon. We need to talk. Call me. She didn't call back. Tuesday morning found him sitting in Dr. Elena Vasquez's office, which looked like a therapy room designed by someone who'd read exactly one book about psychology. Motivational posters covered the walls, tissues were strategically placed on every surface, and a small fountain gurgled in the corner with the persistence of water torture. Samira arrived 15 minutes late, looking like she'd rather be getting a root canal. This is insane, she announced, dropping into the chair farthest from his. I have actual work to do. Join the club, Damon replied, checking his phone. I've rescheduled 2 board meetings for this. Oh, I'm sorry. Are your board meetings more important than the 3 client consultations I had to move? Considering my board meetings affect the employment of 12,000 people, yes. Probably. Samira's eyes flashed. Right. Because art doesn't matter unless it's an investment vehicle for rich people. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Dr. Vasquez chose that moment to bustling in with the aggressive cheer of someone who'd had too much coffee and not enough reality. She was exactly what Damon had feared, middle-aged, aggressively positive, wearing clothes that suggested she got her therapeutic training from daytime television. Good morning, newlyweds, she chirped, settling behind her desk with a clipboard that looked ominously thick. I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez and I'm so excited to work with you both. We're not newlyweds, Samira said flatly. We're 2 people who made a mistake and want to fix it. That's one way to look at it, Dr. Vasquez agreed cheerfully. Another way is to see this as the universe giving you both a second chance to explore what brought you together in the first place. Damon felt his jaw clench. What brought us together was alcohol and poor judgment. Was it? The therapist leaned forward with genuine curiosity. Because according to my notes, you spent several hours together before the ceremony. That suggests more than just impulsive decision-making. It suggests we were very thoroughly drunk, Samira said. Tell me about those hours, Dr. Vasquez pressed. What did you talk about? What did you do? Damon and Samira exchanged a look, and he saw his own discomfort reflected in her eyes. Because the truth was, he remembered more of that night than he'd admitted, the way she challenged him at the blackjack table, the conversation on the rooftop that had felt more real than anything he'd experienced in years, the way she'd looked at him like he was someone worth knowing. We gambled, he said finally. We talked, Samira added reluctantly. About what? Another silence. Damon remembered telling her about wanting to be an architect, the way she'd listen without judgment, without trying to turn the conversation back to his wealth or status. Life, Samira said quietly. We talked about life. And what did you discover about each other? That we're incompatible, Damon said quickly. Completely, Samira agreed. He's a workaholic billionaire who thinks success is the only thing that matters. And she's an idealistic artist who thinks money is somehow morally corrupting. Dr. Vasquez was scribbling notes furiously. Interesting. You both seem to have very strong opinions about each other's values. Because they're obvious, Samira said. Are they? The therapist looked up from her clipboard. Damon, what's Samira's favorite medium to work in? I have no idea. Oils? Samira said, sounding surprised by his ignorance. Samira, what does Damon do when he's not working? Samira opened her mouth, then closed it. He probably works out. Rich guys always work out. I run, Damon said. Central Park, 6 a.m., every morning for the past 8 years. Oh. See. Dr. Vasquez smiled triumphantly. You're both operating on assumptions rather than actual knowledge. That's what these sessions are designed to address. Look, Damon said, leaning forward, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but we don't need to understand each other better. We need to dissolve a marriage that never should have happened. But it did happen, the therapist pointed out. And according to the chapel's records, you were both quite clear about your intentions. Samira shifted uncomfortably. We were drunk. You were inhibited. There's a difference. Alcohol doesn't create feelings, it just removes the barriers that prevent us from acting on them. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Damon found himself looking at Samira, noting the way she was carefully not looking back at him. That's ridiculous, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Let me ask you both something. Dr. Vasquez set down her clipboard and folded her hands. If you could go back to that night in Vegas knowing what you know now, what would you do differently? Everything, Samira said immediately. I wouldn't have gone to the bar, Damon added. Really? The therapist's eyes sparkled with professional interest. You wouldn't have wanted to meet each other at all? The question hit harder than it should have. Because the truth was, meeting Samira had been the highlight of a night that had started as just another business trip. She'd made him laugh, made him think, made him feel like he was more than just his net worth. It doesn't matter what we would have wanted, he said carefully. What matters is what makes sense now. And what makes sense is ending this before it gets more complicated, Samira added, though she was looking at her hands rather than at either of them. Dr. Vasquez made more notes. I'm assigning homework for our next session. Homework? Damon's voice was flat with disbelief. I want each of you to spend time in the other's environment. Damon, you'll visit Samira's gallery. Samira, you'll accompany Damon to a business function. Nothing romantic, just observation. Absolutely not, they said simultaneously. Perfect. You're already thinking in sync. Dr. Vasquez beamed. Same time next week. And remember, the goal isn't to fall in love. It's to understand why two intelligent, successful people made the choice they did that night. As they left the office together, an awkward silence settled between them. They walked to the elevator in mutual discomfort, both probably wondering how their simple annulment had become so complicated. For what it's worth, Damon said as they waited, I didn't mean to imply your work doesn't matter. Samira glanced at him sideways. And I didn't mean to assume you're just another shallow rich guy. I'm a shallow rich guy. Just not only that. I'm an idealistic artist. Just not only that either. The elevator arrived and they rode down in silence. In the lobby, Samira turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Your homework assignment, she said. The gallery visit. When were you thinking? When's good for you? Thursday afternoon. 2 o'clock. But don't expect me to give you the VIP treatment just because you're? She gestured vaguely at his expensive suit. Loaded, he suggested. I was going to say, my accidental husband, but that works too. Despite everything, Damon found himself almost smiling. See you Thursday then. See you Thursday. As she walked away, he caught himself wondering what her gallery really looked like, what kind of art she chose to showcase, whether she was as passionate about other people's work as she clearly was about her own. Which was exactly the kind of thinking that had gotten him into this mess in the first place. But as he watched her disappear into the crowd, Damon realized he was looking forward to Thursday more than he'd looked forward to anything in a very long time. Thursday afternoon brought the kind of November weather that made New York look like a postcard. Crisp air, golden light slanting through windows, the perfect backdrop for pretending this wasn't the most uncomfortable assignment of Damon's adult life. Canvas and light looked different in daylight. Where the evening lighting had been warm and intimate, the afternoon sun streaming through the large windows revealed every detail with stark clarity. The exposed brick walls, the carefully curated pieces arranged to create conversation between different artists, the way Samira had managed to make the small space feel both cozy and professional. She was standing near a large abstract piece, talking animatedly with a couple in their 60s. Her hands moved as she spoke, painting pictures in the air, and even from across the room Damon could see the passion in her gestures. She wore a simple black dress and boots that had definitely seen better days, but she looked more elegant than any woman at the Met Gala. The couple nodded enthusiastically and shook her hand before heading toward the door, stopping to examine several other pieces on their way out. Samira watched them go with a satisfied smile that transformed her entire face. "Successful consultation?" Damon asked, approaching from behind. She spun around, and he caught the flash of pleasure in her eyes before she covered it with professional courtesy. "They're considering the Morrison piece for their living room. Could be my biggest sale this quarter." "Good for you." He meant it, which surprised him. When was the last time he genuinely cared about someone else's professional success? "Don't sound so shocked. I do occasionally manage to convince people to part with their money for art." "I wasn't shocked. I was impressed." Samira tilted her head, studying his face as if looking for signs of condescension. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her, because her expression softened slightly. "Well, you're here for the full experience," she said, gesturing around the gallery. "What do you want to know?" Damon found himself looking at the paintings with new eyes, trying to see them the way she did. "How do you choose which artist to represent?" "Carefully." Samira moved to a smaller canvas, a portrait of a woman that somehow managed to capture both strength and vulnerability in the subject's expression. "I look for work that makes me feel something, even if I can't immediately name what that something is." "That's not very scientific." "Art isn't science, Damon. It's the opposite of science. It's about feeling and instinct and trusting that something matters even when you can't quantify why." She said it with such conviction that he found himself studying her face instead of the painting. "That must be terrifying." "What?" "Making decisions based on feelings instead of data. Trusting your instincts when there's money on the line." Samira laughed, but not unkindly. "You really don't understand how the other half lives, do you?" "Apparently not." He moved closer to the portrait, noting the way the light caught the brush strokes, the subtle variations in color that created depth and emotion. "But I'm trying to." "Why?" The question was simple, but the answer wasn't. Why was he trying? Why did he care about understanding her world when in 2 weeks this would all be over? "Because you're right," he said finally. "I've forgotten how to make decisions based on anything other than potential return on investment. Maybe I need to remember what that feels like." Samira was quiet for a long moment, and when he looked at her, she was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "This piece," she said, turning back to the portrait, "was painted by a woman who'd never sold anything before. She brought it in 6 months ago, convinced no one would want it. She was wrong." "You bought it?" "I believed in it. Sometimes that's enough." Samira moved to another section of the gallery and Damon followed, drawn by something he couldn't name. "What about you? When was the last time you believed in something just because it felt right?" The question hit harder than it should have. Damon thought about his business decisions, his relationships, the careful calculations that governed every aspect of his life. When had he last acted on pure instinct? "Vegas," he said quietly. Samira stopped walking. "What?" "Vegas. Talking to you at the bar, following you from casino to casino, everything that happened that night. None of it made sense from a logical standpoint. But it felt right." "Damon." Her voice was soft, warning. "I'm not trying to complicate things," he said quickly. "I'm just answering your question honestly." They stood there in the middle of her gallery, surrounded by other people's interpretations of beauty and truth, and Damon felt the same pull he'd experienced that night in the desert. The urge to move closer, to touch her face, to see if her skin was as soft as he remembered. Tell me about this one, he said instead, stepping toward a painting that looked like a storm captured in blues and grays. Samira seemed grateful for the distraction. Marcus Chin. He's 24, works nights at a restaurant in Queens so he can paint during the day. This piece sold to a collector in Soho for more money than Marcus had ever seen in his life. You changed his life. He changed his own life. I just provided the platform. Damon found himself studying her profile as she looked at the painting, noting the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her artists, the genuine pride in her voice. This wasn't just business for her, it was mission work. How many artists do you represent? 12 actively, maybe 20 who show pieces occasionally. She glanced at him sideways. Not exactly Fortune 500 numbers. No, but you know all their names, their stories, their struggles. I have 12,000 employees and I probably couldn't tell you the names of half my department heads. That's different. You can't know everyone personally when you're operating at that scale. Can't I? Or did I just decide it wasn't efficient? The admission surprised him. He wasn't sure why he was telling her this, why her opinion of his business practices suddenly mattered. Samira turned to face him fully, and he caught his breath at how close they were standing. Close enough to see the gold flecks in her dark eyes, to catch the faint scent of her perfume mixed with paint and coffee. Maybe, she said softly, efficiency isn't the only thing that matters. Maybe not. The air between them felt charged, heavy with possibility and the memory of what they'd shared in Vegas. Damon found himself leaning slightly closer, drawn by the warmth in her eyes, the way her lips parted slightly when she was thinking. The gallery door chimed and they sprang apart like guilty teenagers. A young woman entered, looking around with the nervous energy of someone who'd never been in an art gallery before. Samira's smile was radiant, transforming her face in a way that made his chest tight. For what it's worth, I think you're more than just a shallow rich guy. Just more? Much more, she said and squeezed his hand before letting go. As they stepped out into the Brooklyn evening, Damon realized that somewhere between the portrait and the storm painting, between watching her work and seeing her passion, his carefully constructed walls had developed some serious cracks. And for the first time in years he wasn't sure he wanted to repair them. The call came at 3 a.m. Samira jerked awake to the insistent buzzing of her phone, her heart immediately racing with the kind of panic that only came with middle-of-the-night emergencies. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something made her answer anyway. Hello. Her voice was thick with sleep. Miss Brooks? This is Dr. Sarah Martinez at Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. You're listed as the emergency contact for Elena Rodriguez. Mrs. Rodriguez. Samira was fully awake now, throwing off covers and reaching for her clothes. Is she okay? What happened? She had a fall in her apartment. Possible hip fracture. She's asking for you. Samira was dressed and out the door in under 5 minutes, her mind racing through everything that needed to be done. Mrs. Rodriguez had no family in New York. Her daughter lived in Florida, her son in California. At 83, she was fiercely independent and would hate being helpless in a hospital bed. The emergency room was exactly what Samira expected. Harsh fluorescent lighting, the smell of disinfectant, and the particular kind of chaos that came with human crisis. She found Mrs. Rodriguez in bed 3, looking smaller and more fragile than Samira had ever seen her. Mija, the older woman said, her voice weak but still carrying that familiar note of affectionate exasperation. I told them not to call you. It's nothing. A hip fracture is not nothing, Mrs. Rodriguez. Samira pulled up a chair, taking the woman's weathered hand in hers. What happened? Stupid. I was trying to change a light bulb in the bathroom. The stool slipped. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Whether from pain or frustration, Samira couldn't tell. They want to do surgery. I told them I can't afford surgery. Samira's chest tightened. She knew Mrs. Rodriguez lived on Social Security and a small pension from her late husband. Hospital bills would devastate what little savings she had. Don't worry about that right now, Samira said gently. Let's just focus on getting you better. But even as she said it, Samira's mind was calculating. Her own savings account was pitiful, enough to cover rent and groceries for maybe 2 months if she was careful. The gallery was finally starting to turn a small profit, but not enough to handle major medical expenses. The next few hours passed in a blur of doctors, insurance forms, and increasingly complicated discussions about treatment options. Mrs. Rodriguez needed surgery, but her insurance would only cover the basic procedure. The better option, the one that would ensure proper healing and mobility, was significantly more expensive. By morning, Samira was exhausted, worried, and running late for the business function she was supposed to attend with Damon. She'd completely forgotten about Dr. Vasquez's homework assignment until her phone buzzed with a text. "Car will pick you up at 7 p.m. The Waldorf. Black tie optional but recommended. D." She stared at the message, then at Mrs. Rodriguez sleeping fitfully in her hospital bed, then back at her phone. The idea of putting on a fancy dress and making small talk with billionaires while Mrs. Rodriguez lay here worrying about money felt obscene. "Can't make it. Emergency. We'll explain later." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Her phone rang immediately. "What kind of emergency?" Damon's voice was sharp with what sounded like genuine concern. "My neighbor. She's in the hospital." Samira stepped into the hallway, lowering her voice. "She needs surgery she can't afford, and I'm the only person she has in the city." "Which hospital?" "Brooklyn Methodist, but Damon, you don't have to." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead before she could protest. Samira stared at her phone, torn between gratitude and irritation. She hadn't asked for his help, didn't want to be another charity case for him to solve with his checkbook. But the practical part of her mind whispered that Mrs. Rodriguez needed all the help she could get. Damon arrived in exactly 19 minutes, still wearing a perfectly tailored business suit that probably cost more than Mrs. Rodriguez's monthly rent. He looked completely out of place in the sterile hospital environment, but he also looked determined in a way that made Samira's pulse quicken. "How is she?" he asked without preamble. "Stable. But the surgery?" Samira rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her. "Her insurance will cover the basic procedure, but the orthopedic surgeon recommends a more complex operation that would give her a better chance at full mobility. The difference is about $30,000. Damon was quiet for a moment, and Samira braced herself for the inevitable offer, the well-meaning gesture that would solve everything and leave her feeling like she owed him something indefinable. "What does she want?" he asked instead. The question caught her off guard. "What?" "Mrs. Rodriguez. What does she want to do?" Samira found herself really looking at him for the first time since he'd arrived. There was no condescension in his expression, no assumption that he knew what was best. Just genuine interest in what an 83-year-old woman wanted for her own body. "She wants to go home," Samira said quietly. "She's terrified of being helpless, of being a burden. She keeps saying she's lived a good life and doesn't want to be greedy asking for more. But that's not what you think. I think she deserves the best possible chance at independence. I think she's earned the right to change her own light bulbs for a few more years if that's what she wants." Damon nodded as if this was exactly the answer he'd expected. "Can I meet her?" Samira hesitated. Mrs. Rodriguez was protective and suspicious of outsiders, especially wealthy ones. But something in Damon's expression, serious, respectful, without a trace of the casual dismissal she'd expected, made her reconsider. "She doesn't like rich people," Samira warned. "Most sensible people don't." They found Mrs. Rodriguez awake and grumpy, which Samira took as a good sign. She looked up suspiciously as Damon approached her bed. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Samira said carefully, "this is Damon. He's a friend." "The husband," Mrs. Rodriguez said flatly, and Samira's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "You told her?" "I tell Elena everything. She's been worried about you." Mrs. Rodriguez fixed Damon with a stare that could have melted steel. "So you're the rich boy who married my Mira in Vegas?" "Yes, ma'am." "And now you're here to throw money at an old woman's problems so you can feel good about yourself?" Damon was quiet for a moment and Samira held her breath. This was the test, she realized. How he responded to Mrs. Rodriguez's blunt challenge would tell her everything she needed to know about who he really was. "No, ma'am," he said finally. "I'm here because Samira cares about you, and I'm starting to care about what matters to Samira." Mrs. Rodriguez studied his face with the intensity of someone who'd learned to read people over 8 decades of living. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because her expression softened slightly. "You pay for my surgery, I owe you something," she said. "You don't owe me anything. But maybe we could work something out that would make us both comfortable." Samira watched in fascination as Damon pulled up a chair, settling in like he had all the time in the world to negotiate with a stubborn elderly woman. "I'm listening," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "I own some properties in the city. Old buildings that need someone to keep an eye on things, make sure the tenants are happy, handle small maintenance issues. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well. You interested in a job?" Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes sharpened. "You offering me charity wrapped up in fake work?" "I'm offering you a real job that comes with real responsibility and health insurance that would cover procedures like this without question. The pay happens to be enough to make monthly payments on your surgery comfortable instead of impossible." For a long moment, the room was silent except for the beeping of monitors and the distant sound of hospital activity. Samira found herself holding her breath, watching two strong-willed people size each other up. "What kind of buildings?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked finally. "Mixed residential and commercial. Small businesses, young families, artists who need affordable studio space." Damon glanced at Samira. "People who matter to the community instead of just the tax base. And you need someone local. Someone who knows the neighborhood. Someone the tenants would trust. Someone who wouldn't let landlords take advantage of people who don't know their rights." Mrs. Rodriguez was quiet for another long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled, the first genuine smile Samira had seen from her since the accident. "When do I start?" As Damon worked out details with Mrs. Rodriguez, Samira stepped back, watching this man she'd thought she understood negotiate with the fierce respect of someone who recognized an equal. He wasn't throwing money at the problem. He was creating a solution that preserved Mrs. Rodriguez's dignity while addressing her needs. When they finally left the hospital 2 hours later, Samira felt like she was seeing Damon clearly for the first time. "That was..." she began, then stopped, not sure how to finish. "What?" "I was expecting you to write a check and walk away feeling good about yourself. Is that what you think of me?" His voice was careful, neutral. "I thought I did. But what you did in there..." Samira shook her head. "You saw her as a person, not a problem to solve. You gave her agency instead of charity." They walked toward his car in comfortable silence, and Samira found herself processing everything she'd witnessed. Not just his generosity but his patience, his willingness to listen, the way he treated Mrs. Rodriguez like her opinion mattered. "We missed the business function," she said as he held the car door open for her. "There will be other functions. Dr. Vasquez won't be happy about the incomplete homework." Damon met her eyes across the car roof. "Some things are more important than homework assignments." As they drove back toward Brooklyn, Samira realized that somewhere between the hospital waiting room and Mrs. Rodriguez's grudging approval, something fundamental had shifted. She'd spent weeks thinking of Damon as a wealthy stranger who'd accidentally wandered into her life. Now she was starting to think of him as something much more dangerous. She was starting to think of him as someone she could fall in love with. The thought terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. The tabloid photo hit the internet at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 days before their final mediation session. Damon stared at his laptop screen, his coffee growing cold as he absorbed the implications of the grainy image captured outside Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. There he was in his $1,000 suit, his arm around Samira as they walked toward his car, both of them looking intimate and comfortable in a way that suggested far more than a business arrangement. The headline was predictably sensational: "Billionaire's Secret Wife, Damon Steele's Vegas Marriage Revealed." His phone had been ringing non-stop for 20 minutes. Patricia, his publicist, 3 board members, and his brother Marcus, who never called unless someone was dying or getting sued. The press had finally connected the dots, and now his carefully controlled private life was about to become public entertainment. But it was the subheadline that made his stomach drop. "From rags to riches, Brooklyn art dealer strikes gold." They'd found Samira. Damon was halfway to Brooklyn before he'd fully processed the decision to go. Traffic crawled through the morning rush, giving him too much time to imagine what she was facing. Reporters camped outside her gallery, photographers following her to the grocery store, strangers dissecting her life on social media. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Emergency board meeting at 2 p.m. Damage control strategy needed ASAP." He deleted it without responding. Canvas and light looked like it was under siege. 3 news vans clustered on the street, reporters clutching coffee cups and looking bored in the way of people paid to wait for drama. Damon parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, pulling his baseball cap low and praying no one would recognize him out of context. The gallery was dark, the closed sign flipped despite it being the middle of the business day. Damon slipped around to the back entrance. The one Samira had shown him led to her tiny office space behind the main gallery. He knocked softly, a pattern they'd established during their dinner dates, 3 short, 2 long. The door opened to reveal Samira looking exactly as shell-shocked as he'd feared. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect ponytail disheveled, and she wore the same clothes from yesterday, suggesting she'd never made it home. "They've been here since 5 a.m., she said without preamble, stepping aside to let him in. "Mrs. Chin from the noodle place called to warn me. She said there were strangers asking about the money-grabbing artist who tricked the rich guy." Damon's jaw clenched. "Samira. Don't." She held up a hand, her voice sharp with a pain that cut through him like a blade. "Just don't. I've been reading about myself online for 3 hours. I know what they're saying." She gestured toward her laptop, which showed a particularly vicious gossip blog dissecting her financial records, her educational background, even her choice to rent instead of buy her apartment. Every detail of her life was being weaponized to support the narrative that she was an opportunistic gold digger who'd trapped a billionaire. "None of it matters," Damon said fiercely. "It's garbage written by people who don't know you. Doesn't it?" Samira's laugh was bitter, foreign coming from her. "Because I just spent the morning watching my reputation get destroyed in real time. 3 clients have already called to cancel their consultations. The Morrison couple, the ones who were going to make my biggest sale, left a voicemail saying they don't feel comfortable working with someone involved in such a public spectacle." The defeat in her voice was unbearable. This was Samira who'd built her gallery from nothing, who'd fought for every artist she represented, who'd made him believe in passion over profit. Watching her crumble because of their association felt like dying. "I'll fix this," he said. "My publicist can control the narrative, redirect the coverage." "With what? The truth?" Samira pulled up another browser window, showing him a particularly cruel meme someone had created using their hospital photo. "The truth is that we got drunk in Vegas and accidentally got married. The truth is that you're a billionaire and I'm nobody special. The truth is exactly what they're saying, we don't make sense together." "You're not nobody," Damon said, moving closer despite the warning in her eyes. "You're extraordinary. You're talented and passionate and you see the world in ways that make me want to be better than I am." "Pretty words," Samira said quietly. "But they don't change reality. Your board is probably demanding your head right now. Your business partners, your investors. How long before they decide I'm a liability they can't afford?" She was right and they both knew it. His phone was buzzing with increasingly urgent messages, each one a reminder of the world he'd have to return to eventually. The world where perception mattered more than truth, where her authenticity would always be seen as a threat to his carefully curated image. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "What?" "Come with me. Away from this, away from them. We'll go somewhere they can't find us, somewhere we can figure this out without the cameras and the commentary." Samira stared at him like he'd suggested they fly to Mars. "I can't just disappear, Damon. I have a gallery, responsibilities, artists depending on me. All of which will still be here when we get back." "Will they?" "Because right now it looks like my business might not survive this scandal." She gestured toward her phone, which was buzzing with what looked like more cancelled appointments. "I can't abandon everything I built to run away with you. Even if staying means losing it anyway?" The question hung between them, brutal in its accuracy. Because they both knew the media attention wouldn't simply fade away. As long as they were married, as long as there was a story to tell, her life would remain under scrutiny. "There is another option," Samira said quietly. Damon's stomach dropped, because he could hear the resolution in her voice. "Samira. We finish what we started. We sign the annulment papers, we make a statement saying it was all a misunderstanding, and we go back to our separate lives." Her voice was steady but he caught the tremor underneath. "Clean break. No more complications. Is that what you want?" She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the truth in her eyes before she spoke it. "It's what makes sense." "Since when do you care about what makes sense?" The desperation in his own voice surprised him. "You told me that night in Vegas that the best things are the ones that scare reasonable people." "This scares me, Samira. This terrifies me. Because I'm falling in love with you, and I don't know how to protect you from my world without losing you completely." Tears spilled over her cheeks and she wiped them away impatiently. "Don't you see? That's exactly why this won't work. You want to protect me, but what I need is someone who believes I'm strong enough to handle whatever comes. Even if it's messy. Even if it's hard. I do believe that. Do you? Because the man I'm falling in love with wouldn't ask me to run away. He'd ask me to stay and fight." The words hit him like a revelation. She was right. He'd been so focused on shielding her from the consequences of being with him that he'd forgotten the woman who'd challenged him to put away his phone, who'd built a business on pure determination, who'd looked Mrs. Rodriguez in the eye and refused to let her settle for less than she deserved. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For forgetting who you are. For thinking you needed me to rescue you instead of asking you to rescue me right back." Samira's smile was watery but genuine. "So what are you asking?" Damon pulled out his phone and, without breaking eye contact, powered it off completely. "I'm asking you to take the biggest gamble of your life. I'm asking you to marry me, really marry me, not because we were drunk in Vegas but because we choose each other despite every logical reason not to. I'm asking you to help me remember that some things matter more than profit margins and public perception. The media will crucify us. Probably. Your business associates will think you've lost your mind. Almost certainly. It's going to be messy and complicated and nothing like the life you planned. I'm counting on it." He stepped closer, close enough to cup her face in his hands. "The question is, are you brave enough to bet everything on us?" Samira looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the exact moment she made her choice. It was there in the way her shoulders straightened, the way her chin lifted with the defiance that had first caught his attention in that casino bar. "All in," she whispered and kissed him like she was sealing a promise. Outside, the reporters were still waiting for a story. But inside the gallery, surrounded by art that celebrated the beautiful, complicated, inexplicable nature of human emotion, Damon Steele and Samira Brookes were writing their own ending. It wasn't the ending either of them had planned. It was infinitely better. If this story touched your heart, remember, sometimes the smallest steps lead to the biggest changes. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe and join us for more stories that prove compassion can change the world.